Well, Diane, what do you know about gender-sensitive or feminist therapy?
Well, I think it's a fairly new therapy. I don't know that it's really connected with any individual per se. There's several people that have been involved in the development of this and continue to be. The therapy is based on the idea that a traditional or patriarchal society that we have affects the lives of both men and women, and so that sexism becomes sort of a problem, or it has become or is a major problem.
Well, it's my understanding that it does examine these roles and rules that really structure the interactions that go on between men and women. Psychopathology, though, is seen as being culturally determined, and therefore men and women are really affected differently. The problem, though, seems to be that the theories that we have in psychotherapy come from a male perspective and a male's viewpoint, male's values.
Yeah, I think the feminist or gender-sensitive therapist tries to work from more of an egalitarian approach, and or somewhat there's some humanistic components to it. But one of the overriding pieces is client empowerment, and basically helping clients learn about what the implications of society and teaching clients how to function more effectively in society at this point.
Oh. So in some ways it's like some of the other theories, but it's different as well. Why don't we bring in our guest, Lenore Walker, and find out more about feminist or gender-sensitive therapy. Welcome, Lenore.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Lenore. Diane and I have been talking about gender-sensitive or feminist theory, and we don't know what it is. Is anything that you could tell us to help us understand its components, concepts?
Well, feminist therapy has been around for a while. It's since the early 1970s, and it came basically out of the scholarship of the new psychology of women. So that we really began to look at the kinds of things we've been taught about human behavior that do come from male values and a male perspective on society, which then affects how women live, how they make their choices, and indeed some of the things we label as psychopathology. But I think one of the most important studies that helped us define feminist therapy was one done by the Bravermans and some of their colleagues it was published back in 1970. And they asked people to rate all of the kinds of behaviors and thinking and attitudes and feelings associated with a healthy man and with a healthy woman, and then with a healthy person. And what we discovered was that a healthy man was considered a healthy person, but a healthy woman couldn't be a healthy person. She didn't have the same characteristics. Now that really sort of typified the kind of double bind that people who were in the feminist movement at that time were talking about. And I think Phyllis Chesler really wrote the first book on women and madness, and talked about how mental illness was being used to label different women rather than having them adapt to society. And so it became a kind of antidote to adaptation therapies, and much more in the early stages of being able to talk about techniques to empower women and to sort out what part of a woman's dysfunction or her need or desire for therapy comes from living in a culture that doesn't always value gender or women's issues, and what part might come from some intrapsychic or areas that they learn as they were growing up that are unique to them and their family situation rather than to society. So you have to work on both.
On both sides.
That's
inner
correct.
and then the
And the
societal
outer.
context.
Exactly.
How did you arrive as a feminist therapist?
Well, my mother says I was always a feminist from the time I was very young. Of course, I didn't have the language or the words to support it. But I was living in the East Coast. I was very involved in the beginnings of the feminist movement, and it sort of resonated, I think, to my social justice issues. It just didn't seem fair. And so I started doing now what we call feminist activities, working in education and in trying to empower women and make it a more fair, egalitarian context for girls to learn as well as for boys. And I became involved in the Early Now groups.
Is that the national organization?
For women.
For women? Uh-huh.
Yes, where we really began, they were really using psychology techniques and group therapy techniques, but they claimed they were leaderless groups at the time, and did what we called consciousness raising, where people shared their experience. And that's one of the tenets that has remained in feminist therapy, is that the personal is political. What happens to you as an individual affects everybody. It affects the power relationships between men and women. And I became, I think, one of the psychologists around the country doing this kind of work that was much more focused on the strengths of women and helping women discover their strengths and kind of be empowered by them. Although we didn't use the word empowerment either in those times.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of the linking to what we now pay a lot of attention to, the multicultural issues.
Absolutely. And feminist therapists did pay attention to those issues early on, but you know, we were mostly white professionals, even though many of us came from backgrounds that might have been of different class strata and some different cultural strata. We talked a lot about it, but we didn't until maybe about 5 to 10 years ago really truly integrate multicultural kinds of attitudes and understandings as psychologists became more sensitive to diversity issues. And we also dealt with the issues of lesbian versus heterosexual women and some of the tensions between the two groups of women, and we've dealt now with the issues of men and the new psychology of men, which is gender sensitive to male ways of knowing the world.
So it's not for women only or for women only approach?
Well, I think it's broadened, but not everybody. Some feminist therapists still insist they do the best work only with women, and they're much more woman-oriented. Some feminist or gender-sensitive therapists really work with both men and women. So it really is up to the individual. When we first started, I think feminist therapy has undergone some generational changes. When we first started, it was mostly adapting feminist theory to good therapy techniques, and we challenged many of the original theories. We challenged orthodox psychoanalysis. We challenged behavior therapy. We challenged the touchy-feely humanist and existential therapy that didn't pay attention to social context and just stuck with the present and the now kind of moment. And so we were much more critical. Then the second generation, we sort of moved and said, wait a second, there are some good things.
Angry stage there, that first one, or critical stage.
The media made us out to be angry, but many of us were not. Some were, but some of our anger was even legitimate. But we like to think we were being critical and using our scholarship because the research supported us. If you only do research on men and then you try to generalize to women, sometimes you'll be right, but a lot of times you won't be. And we challenged our scientific colleagues and said, wait a second, if you're really scientific and you know that you can't generalize from an unrepresentative sample, why are you doing that about human behavior? So we really had to challenge in that way. But the second stage, we stopped throwing everything out and we said, whoa, there are some good things from traditional therapy. And so we began to look at some of the positives and began to integrate that in our therapy. We then moved to a third stage, which was pushing the people in each of the leaders in each of the types of therapy. And in that stage, we began to suggest that maybe you could keep the theoretical components and add gender sensitivity. And so we now have gender-sensitive psychodynamic therapies, gender-sensitive humanistic therapies, behavior therapies, and family therapies, and all the major therapy systems. And now I think we're into the fourth generation. And the fourth generation says feminist therapy theory is on its own. So we've changed therapy, we've made it more adaptive and more responsive to the gender issues, but we also have a particular kind of therapy that says gender is so critical in our lives that we must put it prominent. It must be absolutely used in every therapeutic intervention through the process because it will determine the outcome.
With both men and women?
Yes, with both men and women.
Okay, and
now men don't like it being called feminist therapy.
Well, so we used it.
So we say gender sensitive, but you know what? The principles are pretty much the same.
What about couples and families? Is that
absolutely, absolutely? In fact, it's critical when you talk about couples and families, because we're really talking about roles, and we're talking about the stereotypical attitudes towards roles, how we've been socialized, how that affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And those are the three areas that I believe need to be congruent for good mental health to take place. And so we have to look at that in couples where there are no models. This is a new territory as we redefine male and female roles in relationships.
You talked about the stereotypes and the cultural problems, but you also talked about the importance of the individual. How do you tailor this approach to each individual so it isn't just a kind of a boilerplate stamping out approach, everyone's treated the same?
Well, there are a number of things that are very different in feminist therapy approach. It's not just an add-on and stir and mix. There's a sense of egalitarianism where we don't think that each person in that relationship is equal because we know there's a difference in power. And power and the analysis of power is critical in a feminist therapist's approach. But we go beyond that. We also respect what our client brings to that situation. And we accept that our client is really the most knowledgeable about his or her behavior and how he thinks and how he feels. And it's our job to make sense out of what the client tells us.
Okay, so they bring themselves and they're an expert on that. Then you bring your credentials and therapy training. So.
Of course, and I watch the power balance between us. A lot of what I do in that therapy session is to try to give the client permission to be understood, to present the information in the broadest context. And then I use what they say to look at the social context, the cultural context, the historical context, their feelings of power and their use of power in a sort of political context, and class, of course, context, and then I look at all the regular psychological kinds of things. So I'm always looking for issues of depression, issues of anxiety. How do they give meaning to their life, and what do they do when they get into positions that are difficult for them? Because even if you understand it comes from a social context, if somebody pulls the covers over their head, or somebody's highly anxious, or someone's being beaten, or someone has an eating disorder, or many of the other kinds of disorders that are so common in women, it's not enough to know where it comes from. You also have to have the therapy skills to be able to help them develop other ways of dealing with things that they may not be able to change so easily.
Are there any specific techniques that we associate with this type of therapy that like we talk about empty chair and Gestalt or something like that?
Well, the egalitarianism and the power relationship and looking at relationship is very critical. We use a little bit from everything. So if we need an empty chair technique,
That's fine.
we'll use it.
Okay.
But we're very careful how we use it. We're very respectful of the client, and timing is everything. I think it is in most therapies, but it's everything in feminist therapy. We use some self-disclosure, and we do a lot of monitoring of that. I think in the early days, feminist therapists thought, you have to tell everything to be equal. That's not really, we've worked on that, and that's not really where we're at. We're much more careful about what we say, but we put our values out on the table. We don't try to be a blank screen because we don't believe that you can be a blank screen. So if we articulate our values and we try to give the client the opportunity to relate to us as a person, and that's a really important technique, and we do it from the very start.
So neutrality isn't there.
No,
not at all.
we don't assume neutrality. Now there may be some dynamic oriented therapists who try to do a little bit more neutrality. Some people are more active. I also have a cognitive behavioral approach superimposed on my feminist therapy, and I have a trauma approach. I'm very sensitive to issues of trauma, and so I often create the atmosphere that allows a person to talk about it, and I ask questions directly and then listen to what the client says, and I move back and forth in areas as I sense are appropriate for the client. And sometimes I'll actually move to a place, see that I've hit a kind of raw spot, and I'll move back and away from it, and then I might go back again, depending upon the situation.
Well, theoretically, this sounds really sound, and it seems to make a lot of sense. Does it work? Is there any research that supports this approach?
Well, there's not much research. That's one of the issues that feminist therapists are working on now. But there's the practical understanding. Feminist therapists are usually the therapy of choice. Once a woman, particularly the women, go to see a feminist therapist, they don't go back. They understand that they feel understood, they feel empowered, and we know it works in the issue of violence cases. And with the statistics about the high numbers of women who have experienced physical or sexual abuse in their childhood, in their relationships, intimate relationships, or in their workplace, we know that that's a critical area that feminist therapy has been very supportive of.
In a few minutes, we're going to be watching you do a demonstration of feminist therapy. And what were your goals in this interview with Gina?
Well, this was an initial interview with Gina. I knew almost nothing about her when it started, so my major goal was to learn a little bit about her and about what was important to her. I wanted to know what kind of background she grew up in. Interestingly, although she's an African-American woman, she's a professional woman and grew up in a professional, educated family. And so we have to be very careful about making assumptions just by somebody's racial identification, also looking at class, at history, at educational levels, and social political kinds of contexts, and where those values that she would have might clash with society's expectations for her. So I was very sensitive both for gender and for race and culture in this particular case, just knowing that little bit of information. I also knew she was getting divorced, but I didn't know much more about it. And I knew she had at least one son. So I knew she was parenting, who she had just come from watching his first basketball game. So I knew that she was parenting an almost adolescent child. And so that's where I started with, okay, what does, what she comes to in therapy, what are her styles of dealing with these kinds of issues based on what I know about human behavior and what she presents. And we went from there.
Is there anything that we should be watching for? Anything particular from that session that the audience should be looking for as they watch this?
Well, I think the issue of abuse does come up, and her disclosure of the abuse, and I would suggest watching the directness of my questions and my response to her presenting the abuse issues, my allowing her to present it, my naming it, my validating her story so that she can continue talking about it. I use a technique that I have developed that comes from a combination of feminist therapy and trauma therapy, where I actually I ask her to tell me about 4 specific incidents of abuse so that I can get a sense of what this is about for her and what kind of violence it is. And she begins to open up and talk much more. And my concern for her safety, which she was very, she felt that was a real connection between us. And so I would pay some attention to that.
Would those be the unique features, though, of the feminist approach that we might not see in one of these more male-oriented approaches?
Well, it certainly is one of them. Also the intensity of the relationship between the two of us, I think is very important to watch. And my kind of activity and stepping back. My ability to be active and ask very specific, direct questions, but also my ability to step back and give her the space to talk about them without providing a solution right away.
So you really listened and were empathic?
Yes, although that's not particularly feminist. I think that's good therapy. But it's that I also want you to look at the ability to bring out her strengths. I think that's specifically feminist. We're not just empathic with pain, we're empathic with the strengths. And we really want to move to an educational, non-pathology approach, a less authoritarian, but not give up our power as a therapist. Somebody comes to us because we have special knowledge, and we want to not deny that, but we don't want to abuse it.
Okay. Well, let's don't wait anymore. Let's get on and watch the interview with Gina.
All right, well, we're going to talk for about 45 minutes or so, maybe a little longer if we need it.
All right.
And I don't know very much about you at all. So I'm going to let you do a lot of the talking.
Okay.
But you can know a little bit about me too.
All right.
So I don't know what you've been told, but I'm a psychologist. And my name is Dr. Lenore Walker, and I'm from Denver, Colorado. Now. And, you can ask me some questions if you want, like where I went to school or those kinds of things, if that's important to you or whatever, at any point. But, you're certainly welcome to ask me anything now before we start, because we'll probably talk about some personal stuff, and it's only fair. You can ask
that
me
I can have it in return.
No, I might not answer, but
that's all
you
right.
might not answer what I say.
Too. That's true. Yeah.
So,
what is your area of specialty?
my specialization is working with battered women and child abuse victims.
Okay.
So that's really what I specialize in, and in feminist therapy, therapy with women.
All right.
So
there you
that's
go.
my,
This is pretty good.
Yeah.
We're getting along real good.
All right.
I'm in my pro-women stage now, so yeah.
That's why I asked you where you worked out.
Yeah, I see that.
Perfect.
Oh, yes,
Perfect.
Definitely.
So all I know is what we just a little bit we were chatting before. So I know that you have done this before.
Yes.
And I know you've been in therapy for a while.
Yes, I have.
So you know the game of therapy, where we talk and back and forth. And really, what I think we can do today, because it's just a kind of short initial time, is to explore some of the things that have been going on in your life, some things that are good, some things that haven't been so good. I'll get to know you a little bit, and then I'll try and give you a little feedback at the end as to what I see is going on.
Okay.
So how's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right.
Sounds good. I can definitely talk, so
All right.
okay.
Well, and if sometimes I'll take some notes or something, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I just
That's fine.
grab my pad or so.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't. I just.
Okay, so I won't feel hurt if you don't take notes.
No,
okay.
It does not mean I'm not listening.
Okay. All right. That's all right. That'll be fine.
So why don't you give me a little, maybe just a little kind of overview of what you're doing now and
Okay.
what life's like for you. I know you have a son.
I actually have two sons.
Okay.
Yes, I have two sons.
How
12 in 7th grade and
The
8.
basketball star.
Yes, the basketball player. Yes,
Okay.
he's real happy that he made the 7th grade team, and I'm real proud of him.
Oh,
He's been destined to do this since he was 2 years old.
All
That he
right.
was going to eventually get on his school team and represent his school and wear the uniform and all of that, and he is just on cloud 9, and I'm so happy for him.
That's
And
neat.
I was very proud watching him today playing the game.
Is this the first game?
First home game, yeah, first home game. So
that's
it's one of many more the rest of my life. I just see myself
be there.
through for years, but that's okay. It is different now watching him at the higher level than in the Park District, different leagues they were in, and just weekend kind of basketball. So, and my youngest is 8. He's in 3rd grade, and he's getting into the athletics. He likes to do it, I think, but sometimes I wonder, is he doing it just because Big Brother's doing it? But if I ask that, he goes, no, I like it. He's got big plans, what he's going to do and everything. So it's kind of nice.
Is he playing anything now?
Yeah, he just finished playing soccer,
Uh-huh.
and they're going to go into basketball starting this Saturday.
Oh,
so
wow.
they've got a 3rd and 4th grade team. At least 3rd and 4th grade Park District League. He can't play on a team yet. They don't have it at that level.
Right.
But that's where my oldest started. So he's real excited about doing that. And he actually is kind of theatrical. He just, the 3rd grade at the school where he's going, they put on an opera every year.
An opera?
Yeah, an opera. They pick an opera. They just did the Magic Flute.
Oh, how
And he was the
exciting.
prince. And he did a
He was
really
the
good, not because he's
prince?
my child, but
Wow.
I was very proud of him. He carried it off perfectly. He did the ad-libbing with the singing and the arm movements, and that is his calling. He needs to really do that more. I'm going to encourage him to maybe do that if he gets involved with, like, the Park District has classes on acting, and they can audition for small plays and things like that. And there's a church activity group that he's in that they do that, and he likes to do that. So I think we're gonna see if he wants to explore that a little bit, because he does like it.
And this is the little one.
This is my youngest, yes,
Wow,
yeah. So they
isn't
each have
that
their own way
neat?
of doing
Yeah.
things, and they both do well in math. So I'm real happy about it. But that's probably because I did well in math, so they like that, and science, math and science, they really enjoy.
Now, are you working now?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm a teacher. I teach chemistry.
Oh, boy. So you
Yeah.
did well in math and science,
Yes, I
didn't you?
did. Yes, I did. Yeah, I've always liked those areas. And oftentimes, tying the feminine part of it, I don't find very women going into those different fields.
No, those
I
are
was at a
not.
conference this past weekend, and most of the teachers that were there were male. Very few females. And that always gets me going. Because there should be more. And I always encourage the girls who are in my class to pursue the sciences and the math and don't, push it aside. And what's funny, too, is when they pair up in lab groups, I sometimes have co-ed groups, and the girls usually tell the guys what to do. They take charge of the situation,
Right.
and I like that a lot. I
Now,
always
what grade do you
recommend it.
teach?
I have mostly sophomores. A few juniors, a couple of seniors, I have to take that last science before they graduate. And this is my 5th year in high school. I taught 6 years before that at junior high level.
You like the high
teaching-
school better?
Yeah, I do. I like the high school. Yeah, I'm teaching kids and not hormones as much. In junior high, you deal a lot with hormones and a lot of nurturing, and they need the attention because they can't help it. And I'm kind of in that situation with my 12-year-old because he's hitting that stage. I'm like, oh boy, now I got to deal with what I've been working with. Like, I kind of have an advantage because I've taught and I kind of know what to expect, and he knows that, and actually he likes it. Yeah, that has not been a problem with mom being a teacher, going to different things, and that they actually kind of expect me to do things. If I don't do something, Mom, why did you say something? Like, well, I was being mom, not teacher, but they kind of want me to step up and do things.
Are you in the same school district as
No, I'm
they're
not. No, I'm in a different school district. And my youngest actually wants to be in one of my classes one day, so we'll see. We might not. But it has been an advantage for them with me being a teacher, whereas sometimes it could be a disadvantage. They actually do like it. They do. And I'm glad of that because it could be a problem.
Now, are you married now?
No, I'm going through a divorce, which is almost final.
Uh-huh.
And I'm quite happy about it, by the way.
Okay, I figured you're in your pro-women stage. There might be something there.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
And it's actually getting toward the end. It's not so painful and hurtful anymore. I'm coming to my own within the last 2 years. We were married almost 15 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it is. And I stuck it through for about 13 and then realized that I'm not happy. I wasn't happy. And I actually woke up New Year's Day 2 years ago and said, I've got to change. This is not going to work. I can't keep going around in circles. I'm not going forward at all. I keep going backwards. And that's when I started counseling. I called up Governor State, actually, and got into the counseling program here. And then I continued it with South Suburban Women's Shelter. So,
A battered women's shelter.
Yes.
So you were abused
Yes.
physically,
Yes.
mentally,
Yes.
sexually?
No. Verbally also. Yeah. So that was probably the most out of all of them. The physical didn't happen on that many occasions, but that was the breaking point for me to realize that this is it. I've got to really do something with this marriage.
When was the first time that he physically hit you?
I'm trying to remember. It's either the first or second year we were married.
Do you remember the incident?
Oh, yes.
Tell me
very
about it.
much
Tell
so.
me about
We had disagreed on something, and he wouldn't actually hear me through, which at the time was very frustrating for me. And I don't even remember what I did. I don't know if I like pushed him or just to get his attention, but he hit me in my face.
Slapped you?
Yeah.
Open hand?
Yeah, it was open hand, but it wasn't as hard as the second time he did it. So
Just one
time,
slap?
yeah. And I was in the kitchen. I remember when it happened, and at that point, it was like, oh my goodness. And it was really a struggle for me because I told myself all up until that point that if a man ever hit me, that was it. He's out of my life. Forget it. But that didn't happen.
What happened? What did he do afterwards?
I think he said he was sorry, but then he said that I caused it to happen.
And
That
did
if
you
I
believe
had
it?
Yes, I did. I did. Because I thought I pushed him to a point where he didn't have any boundaries or any way to deal with it. And yes, I did think it was my fault.
You still?
No, I don't anymore. No, because you don't have to get to that point.
But it took you a while to get...
Oh, it took me a long time. It took me a very long time to realize that. And it's funny because when you're in it, you can't see it. When I look at other people outside of what I am, I could easily spot it. But it's real hard to spot it with you. And I almost believe that it wasn't really that case. It's hard for me even now to say I'm an abused woman because I still don't see myself that way. Yet I know I was. And it's been difficult. That's probably one of the hardest things to come to terms with.
So you also see yourself as a strong woman?
Yes. Yes.
So,
yes.
of course, it's very difficult to know that, you can be strong and be an abused woman at the same time.
Yeah, it is tough. Yeah, but...
Tell me the last incident that happened.
The last incident, we had not communicated in probably about 3 months, where we needed to talk about things, talk about
you
the
were still living
relationship.
together?
We were still living together, yes. Still sharing the same bedroom and all of that. And we hadn't communicated, and we needed to talk. I'm a talker. I need to talk. I can't sit on problems. Let's talk about them. Let's work it out. Whether we agree or not, I need to communicate. And he shut me out. And for about 3 months, we didn't talk about feelings, what we're going to do, how we're going to fix this, any of those things. And one day I just decided I wanted to talk, and he had to listen to me, and I had wanted him to say something, but he didn't want to do that. He avoided me by moving to different rooms, going upstairs, going downstairs, and I followed him because it's one of those days I said, I'm going to get this done because this is crazy. We can't keep going like this. And he just downright refused. And it was so frustrating that at one point I just took my hands away. Can't you just listen to me? And I didn't really hit him or anything. It's just that I needed him to stop moving and to say, let's stop. Let's talk about this. And he put his hands around my neck and pushed me back against the wall and continued pushing me down the stairs and said a couple things, yelling and screaming, things like that. And I'm on the stairs like, I don't believe you just did that. You didn't listen to me. I got back up, went back and confronted him again, saying, look, you've got to talk because this is crazy. He then pushed me down, picked up a chair to get ready to hit me, didn't, but put the chair down, ended up kicking me. And, well, actually, no, he didn't put his hands around me. That was, grabbed my wrist, twisted them, and pushed me up against the wall, and pushed me out of the bathroom, down the stairs. After he kicked me, I still got up, trying to, he's not really listening to me. I could get through to him. This is this important. And at that point, he put his hands around me and was getting ready to choke me. And at that point, I realized, you're not going to get through this, man, so just stop. And he didn't choke me, but there was a look on his face that I've never seen before. It's like, I'm not going to get up in his face again. And at that point, I then removed myself and went to a bedroom. And for the rest of the evening, because this happened about 12:30 in the morning, we attempted to try to discuss it, but it didn't work. It didn't work. And then about a half hour after it happened, I went downstairs and came back upstairs. My youngest was there. And my first concern was, oh my gosh, what did he see? What did he hear? Oh no. And I still think he might have heard and maybe saw something, but it's never come out. I don't think he's traumatized by it. But I still wonder if he saw it and heard it. And
Have you asked him?
Yes, I have.
And he said
And
no?
he said, no, he said, I just heard you guys talking. That's all. I didn't, So I had to convince myself that that was okay. And still, I don't worry about it too much now because I know they're a lot happier and things are going much better now. But that happened in April of 95. April of 95. And I didn't tell anybody about it until Mother's Day of 95. I told my mom.
Wow.
About it. That was the first time I told her about anything.
About
She had
anything?
thought that that was happening all along in our marriage.
Did she say why she thought that?
Because she saw how he was as a person, and she knew how I was as a person.
Was he very demanding,
Yes, very much.
controlling,
Yes. And
argumentative?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, but very much in need of some things that I thought I could give him. He was an adopted child. He says he had a happy childhood. I wonder sometimes if he did. I knew he wasn't a happy person when I met him, but I thought I had enough happiness for both of us, and I could make him happy. And I did my best. I tried. And it was funny because now when people hear that we get a divorce, they're so shocked. And you all look so fine. You look, and we did. I did a real good job on the outside.
You covered up well.
Yeah, I did. And then when we came back home, it all unraveled and it was still there. And it's funny because I'm seeing a man right now, and he said, when we go out, you pay me a whole lot of attention. But when we're alone, you don't. And I'm like, yeah, what about it? It's okay. But he says, you know what, I think you're so used to doing that you can't get out of that.
Interesting.
And I went, okay, never thought about that. And I really did think about it. And he's right. I've been going through those motions for so long that I'm still doing that. And it's a completely different person.
What happens if he gets angry with you?
This guy, I don't worry about it anymore. One, because the first thing I say is he's a man. That's the first reaction I'll say. But he points out, but I'm a different man. You can't compare me. But I don't take it so personally anymore. I don't take it as an attack upon my intelligence or my feelings or my situation. He hasn't gotten that upset, which is kind of nice too. We talk very openly about things. We don't let a day go by that we don't deal with it. Well, we did let one day go by. We did have a day where we cooled off with something. And
Now, are you living together? Or
No.
But you see each other every day?
No, we don't. No. Okay. Basically, we see each other weekends, and we're dating. We're not, serious. I'm not serious with anyone. I won't be serious for a while. But it's interesting, to start getting back into dating and to be single again.
Was that hard?
No. If it's done the way I want it to be done, it's not hard.
What's the way you want it to be done?
To not have commitment and no attachments, just to be friends and to enjoy each other's company with no seriousness right now.
Can you do that with the guys you meet?
So far, yeah. He's the other one that's putting opposition to it right now.
But you're only dating one guy at a time?
No, I'm not.
You're dating others?
Yes. Yes.
Are you dating African-American men?
Yes.
Are they more... some of my friends tell me that they are more demanding of commitment and of your time than some of the other guys are.
Well, my husband was, and the guy that I'm talking about now is. I don't know if all of them are, but...
of course, not everybody.
I'm open to see if there is a difference, to be honest with you. I do know that when I've gone to a couple of clubs or I was at a restaurant this Saturday and we were waiting to be seated, a whole group of us, and there was a white guy that did start talking to me, and I just started talking. I'll talk to probably anybody. I'll talk to dogs on the street, cats on the corner. I'll just do that. It's just me. And for some reason, he just started talking to me, and I just kept talking because I'm at a point in my life where there's nothing wrong with a little conversation. Sometimes people just need to know that somebody's listening to them.
Would your husband have been jealous of you doing that?
Oh, absolutely.
So you were.
Oh, absolutely.
You wouldn't have done that if you were out with him.
No. So in a lot of ways, I'm sort of busting out, as they say, doing things that I've always done until we got together.
And your boys now see you do that?
see me talking to people.
Other
Yes.
people without
Yes.
it being a big fuss?
Yes, yeah. They'll say, Mom, why the person not talking to? I said, I really don't know. I guess they were lonely and they just wanted to say something. And they're like, oh, okay. And they're okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're okay. They have met this one guy, and they're very open about it. I've told them he's not going to be your father. He's just a friend, nothing serious and all of that. And they go, yeah, we know, Mom, it's okay. They're really pretty good about it. But it was kind of easy. I was worried at first.
Do they have contact with their dad?
Yes, they do.
And is he
Yes,
good
they
with
do.
them?
Yes, pretty much they are. He is.
Think he's going to handle adolescence well?
I think so, but I still think he's growing up too. And not to put it all on him, I'm still growing up too. I've just found myself again, and I actually have a new way of looking at myself, and I like it. And I am constantly evolving. This is not I'm going to be this way forever. I'm changing daily, sometimes weekly, and I've got some growing up, to do. And I know he does too. And some of the growing up might conflict, with them, and there may be some problems. Sometimes I don't think the children feel comfortable with him, because I know I didn't feel comfortable with him on some things. So that could cause some problems where they don't feel comfortable talking to him about things. Do
they talk to you about that?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. We communicate very openly. I'm really, really happy about that. That's one of the things I think that will get me through this adolescent period, is that I do talk openly with my children. I call things the way they are. We talk about girls, we talk about guys, we talk about sex, we talk about anything, and I never criticize them for it. At least I try not to. I don't think I do. But I've always told them, if you can talk about anything here. But if there are things that you don't want to talk about, please go to their uncles. I say you can even go to Grandpa, but Grandpas are the older generation, so you may not want to talk about some things with Grandpa. But
Yeah, this is your father?
yeah, my father.
So you have a relationship with your father and your mother?
Oh yes, both my parents are alive.
And,
yes.
And you're close with them?
Yes. Yes.
They live nearby?
Yes, they live in the city. Yes, they do. And I was close growing up. Got married, wasn't too close.
That was going to be my
husband,
next question.
yeah.
Did he not like that?
Yeah, no, he liked us, immediate family, and probably felt threatened by my family, pointing out errors in my family and things that he didn't like, and I actually believed some of those. At one point, to prove my love for him, I did not communicate with my family for over a year.
Do you feel guilty about that now?
No, I don't. I did earlier, but I don't now. I don't really feel guilty about anything I've done. If I had to do it all over, if you put me back in the same time, knowing me, the fact that I really believed what I was doing was right, I probably would do everything again. Except maybe once the abuse started. I think I would probably pull out then, because those were definitely signs that I did not pick up on. I was too stubborn and too convinced I could change them, when you really can't change people. They're going to be who they're going to be, and you just hope that you can get to a certain point where you can work together with it. I had a hard time accepting the differences. I wanted to change the differences because they were too big. And if I didn't change them, that would mean we'd have problems.
Did you know his family?
Not extremely well.
Did they live nearby?
Oh, yeah, they did. Yeah. Actually, I did. I did know them fairly well. Yeah. But there were problems when he was growing up, too. I know his mom and I were kind of close. We talked about things, and that he had trouble, following through on things. He procrastinated. He didn't want to take blame sometimes. Very stubborn, wanted to do it his way and no other way. And his mom and I would say, well, yeah, but maybe we could do this and maybe we could do that. And we both tried to, fix things for him.
Did she try to do that for her husband, too?
I think so, yeah. I think so.
Did you ever notice any kind of emotional or verbal kinds of cruelty?
No, I didn't but I sometimes question it, thinking like, the apple doesn't fall, far from the tree, and you're raised a certain way. I know his mother loved, her husband, but I also know, too, that she wasn't as totally happy as she could be.
Did you see any of that kind of abuse when you were growing up?
No. No.
You have brothers?
Yes, I have 2 brothers and a sister. I'm the oldest.
You're the
out of 4. Yeah. And I saw my parents argued.
And you're how old?
I'm 38.
And you're
my sister's 36. My brother is 30. Will be 35, and I have a brother who's 28. So We were a pretty close family. We stayed pretty much amongst ourselves. We went out and things, but my mom had a real close handle on all of us.
So she knew where everybody was.
Yeah, and that's her. I know how that is. If she had a wish, she probably would love all of us to live in one house with her, so she could have us close by. But yet she would say she would not get into our business, but yet she does. And that's that mom thing. But see, I understand that because, at least I think I understand it. She was adopted as well. And it's very important for her to have her family close to her. Her family is very, very important to her. And I can understand why, you know, being adopted.
So you got
and
those
everything.
values from her.
Yes, yes, I did. Growing up, my mom and dad argued, but it was always a situation where my dad would leave until he cooled down, and then he would come back and they would work it out. My dad never hit my mother. He wouldn't dare. My mother was too strong a person to let that happen.
What kind of occupation did your dad have?
My dad's a teacher, and so is my mom. Actually, my dad still, he teaches at college, Kennedy King, and my mom is actually an administrator.
What does
he teach? He's a graphic art, communications, offset printing, publications, all that kind of thing at Kennedy King College in the city. And my mother started out as a Head Start aide and worked her way through school and became a teacher, got her master's and her certificate, and became an administrator. So she now oversees 35 or more preschool sites around the south side of the city.
Well, it sounds like you're proud of her.
Oh, I am. I am, very much so. I am.
And how about your sisters and brothers? Are they all teachers too?
Nope. Nope, they're not. Although my youngest brother's getting the hang of it because he's working with my dad right now in the printing department, and he also has been helping teach some of the classes. So I think he's getting the bug. He is. I think he's getting it. And he's been talking about getting certified as a tennis instructor so he can also teach tennis. So I think he'll probably do it. Yeah. But I didn't start out that way. I was going a totally different direction, but very, very happy where I am now. I wouldn't do anything else but teach. I really like it. It gives me everything that I want. It gives me a career. It gives me satisfaction in helping people, which is something I like to do. It kind of puts me up on a pedestal in a way, which I like. And yet it gives me time to be a mom and spend time with my kids and to raise them and do as much as I can with them, which is what I wanted.
Now, how often did they see their dad?
Once a week and every other weekend. And
so that gives you some time also to spend with friends.
Yes, 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 it does.
Did you have to develop all new women friends as you started getting divorced? Or?
No, actually, I haven't gotten any new women friends. I have the same women friends that I've had all through my marriage. A couple have developed since working at the high school and even at the junior high before I taught at this high school, so that I have a couple of new friends, but they're like 5, 6 years old in friendship.
Right.
So that I haven't really developed any new female friends.
So you didn't let yourself get too isolated?
Yeah, I did. I did. I would be times my girlfriend would say, come on and go out. And then he'd look sad and I go, oh, that's okay, I'm going to stay home. Or he would make me feel guilty about going out. And then I would stay home. And I shouldn't have did that. I should have went out because there was nothing wrong with me going out. It didn't threaten our relationship any, but I think it did for him. I know he was insecure about some things, as all of us are. But I basically never did anything, that would make him think otherwise. That he couldn't see when I went out with my friends, I'm a better person when I come back. I'll be a better wife when I come back because I had a chance to be me. And then once I get that taken care of, then I could jump back into the role of being wife, and we'll all win in this situation.
The batterers don't like that.
No.
You can't be me.
No.
You have to be him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what made you decide that you were battered? Was it the last incident, or was it before then?
It was the last incident that made me really say that I was a battered woman.
And what'd you do?
The next day I called the police.
Good for you.
But I never filed out a report.
How did you get the courage to even call?
Oh, I had called before. I had called before.
Had you filed a report before?
No, I never filed an official report. Never
What
did
was
a
the
restraining.
what was the worst incident that happened?
Probably this last one.
But how about
Before that?
Before that, right?
Well, there's a toss-up between two. Once when I got slapped in the face on the middle of a highway. And
in the car?
No, outside of the car. That probably more so than when he spit in my face and called me a bitch. That probably isn't up like with the. I still feel that slap. I still feel it to this day.
And that was when you said that it was a harder slap with an open hand as well.
Yeah.
Is that when you called the police?
No, because I wasn't in the city. I was out of town. When he spit in my face, I called the police then. I did, because I didn't know what else to do. And I figured, okay, that's just like hitting me. Fine, I'm calling the police on you. And they came, and basically they said we should spend time away. You know, he should leave. He didn't. He stayed upstairs. I stayed downstairs.
So they didn't make an arrest?
No, they didn't. No, it's real hard to do that. And I wasn't willing to press charges.
How long ago was it?
That was about maybe 4 years ago. Well, no, maybe about 3 years ago. 94.
And you still had to press charges?
I didn't. I filed a complaint, and the police made a report of it, but nothing was ever really done because I felt it was my fault again. Yeah, I do. I thought it was my fault. I provoked him. That made him do that. It's not all that bad. I really don't want to get a divorce. I really like to work this out, and all those other things I try to convince myself of. And, you know, even it's hard to me to say, well, what was the spit in the face? You know, I still find it hard to say that was, you know, abuse, but it is. You know, I know it is. It is. You know.
And it sounds like it wasn't just a spit in the face. We have all these other incidents, and it sounds like you had a lot of psychological and verbal abuse as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah. I mean, he would criticize what I would wear. You shouldn't wear that. You don't look right in that. And I would go, okay, well, what would you like me to wear? And it doesn't make sense. That's one of the reasons my girlfriends get so mad. It's like, you are so intelligent. You could just, why do you do that? But when you're in love and you think you're doing the right thing, it's very easy to follow along with that. You know, but the other incidents, I didn't have any bruises or any marks from it, so it didn't stay with me. But the last incidents where I went down the stairs and he twisted that, I had bruises from that. I did.
Did you seek medical?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. But
so you told him you wanted a divorce?
I did, yes.
And how did he handle it?
He didn't like it. To this day, he still doesn't want it. But he's accepted the fact that that's what's going to happen. And claims he's ready to move on and to, you know, go on with his life and me go on with my life.
So he didn't get worse afterwards?
No, because I told myself I won't put myself in a situation again. Whenever
Did he separate at that point? Or?
No, I did.
So you just left with the kids?
Yeah. Well, actually,
So that happened, yeah.
Okay,
that
happened in 95, April of 95.
Right. You told your mom the next month. And they were supportive?
Very supportive. They didn't interfere. But we had a code on the phone that if something happens, I was to just pick the phone up, hit a number. They knew that to come out and help me. My brothers, basically. Yeah. Yeah, I never used it, but we did have that system set up.
Excellent.
But I also told them you don't have to worry about this happening again because I'm not going to confront him. The abuse happens when I confront him.
The physical abuse?
Yes.
But the emotional abuse happens no matter what you do?
Right. So that happened April of 95. As of July of 95, we stopped having sex.
At your instigation?
Yes. And then of October of 95, I moved out of the bedroom and slept on the couch, Thanksgiving. And at that point, that's when I told the boys that Mom and Dad are going to get a divorce. During the month of October, I asked them to leave. I gave them to the end of the year because the lease was in my name. I paid for everything. It's my place. You should leave. I shouldn't leave. Why should I with the children and myself? You leave. He said he would move by the end of the year. December 31st came, didn't move. January, and didn't move. February, March, April, did not move. We went to court for the first time with the divorce in April of 96. And at that point, he asked me for alimony and maintenance to maintain the kind of lifestyle he was accustomed to. My lawyer asked me, can you leave? And I went, I'm out the house now. I mean, it was like, I didn't even blink. I said, I can go right now.
Oh, wow.
So after having lunch with my brother and thinking about it and realizing I don't really want to move back home with Mom, I decided I'll move. And Mother's Day of this year, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. Took the kids with me and moved. And have been very happy since then.
Good for you.
Yeah. I'm slow, but once I get my mind made up, I don't
you
much.
certainly, you know, that doesn't sound like that was easy for you to do at all.
Yeah. April was rough, but May was very easy. Moving was very easy. It was very, very easy, you know. But
so you're really only out about 5 months, 6 months or so.
Yeah, physically, yeah. But
Right.
mentally and my heart and all of that,
You've
it's
been
been
out.
over a year. Yeah. Yeah. It happened that Mother's Day when I told my mom. When I finally told my mom about that, that did it for me. Pretty
Do you think
much.
that's why you didn't tell her before? Was
Oh,
because
yeah.
you
Disappointment.
once
Oh,
you
yeah.
knew you told her you'd have to do something?
Somewhat, yeah. And I was still apprehensive about making that decision. But looking at it, and I was going through counseling at the time too,
Right.
it was very clear that this is not going to get any better. And you have to own
And
up
he
to
never got into counseling?
He did a little bit in September of last year, of 95. He
95,
went through counseling. He wanted us to go through counseling together. I said no. We had done that twice before. And there was no way. No way.
Did he admit to his abusiveness?
No, to this day. He said I instigated it. I basically hit him first. I had physical contact with him first. In
Do you
all the
believe that?
situations. I did touch his body first in all cases, but I don't believe it was abuse on my part. I'm a very physical person. I have to be careful being a teacher naturally, but I deal with that. And that's my way of saying, hey, focus on me. We got to talk. This is important. But he makes it the other way.
But you also learned, I mean, you know, think about your ability to understand that if you did that, then it would get more physical. Now, he had the responsibility of not responding to you.
Exactly. He did not have
but-
to, I do believe, he did not have to
No,
go
of course not.
the way he went. I know that. I know now, too, that I don't have to do that anymore either.
Right.
That I've learned. But,
Right. So you protected yourself.
yes, that's why I knew it wasn't going to happen again. Because I knew the only time he did that was when I confronted him. I could stop myself. I could stop. I don't have to do that. You know, I can just, you know.
And he
not
hasn't
do it
gotten
again.
crazy during the separation and divorce, pending divorce?
As far as I know, no.
Because, you know, some batterers do.
Yeah.
So just watch out for it.
Yeah, my girlfriends have been telling me that. And I do watch, you know, to make sure. But so far it seems to be okay. But it's not far from my mind.
Is he working?
Yes, he wasn't, but now he is.
What does he do?
He's a coach, basketball coach. Which is why the son plays basketball.
Of your son's team?
No. He's at college level. The college level.
So he doesn't have to show up at the same games that you do?
Yes. He was
does.
there today. I saw him.
And that's
but,
okay?
Yeah, it's okay. I don't hate him.
Does he know you have a boyfriend? that you
He
date?
probably does if the boys talk, which they do. And I'm sure, I've not told my boy, shh, don't tell him. No, I'm not going to do that. He probably does know. And that'll be interesting to see what happens with that. The world is too small of a place for us not to ever come in contact with each
Well,
other.
especially with the children.
Yeah, exactly, with the kids. And just the same interests that we have, we could eventually cross paths. So that'll be interesting to see. I don't feel there's anything wrong with it. I don't have any connection with him anymore. I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to defend anything with him anymore.
Right.
So I think I'll be fine with the situation. And I would hope that he would be okay with it too.
What makes you think he'll be so mature? He hasn't been so mature on other things.
I know, that's my hopeful thinking. But it really doesn't matter because I will deal with it when it happens.
Well, it does matter just to stay safe.
Yes.
That's
I
what
try
matters.
not to
That
come up-
tends to be an aggravator
Yeah.
for some men. Not all, but for some. So,
and in his case, it could be.
so just be,
It could
you
be.
know,
I will.
you were together for a long time, so just be careful with
Yeah,
it.
I
That's
will.
all.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to. Yeah, I appreciate that because sometimes I get this rosy picture. Everything's going to be fine,
Right.
And then I quickly think, wait a minute, was it really? And
Right.
yeah, so it's something that I definitely.
But that's a lingering kind of thing from having been abused is that you deny and you minimize everything so that you don't want to deal with how bad it could
Yeah.
get.
And part of me says, well, why should I? Like I know that this one particular man I'm saying he might want to come to a game. Why can't he come? But then it's like, well, he's going to be
in
there.
your face.
Yeah,
you know?
it is, and I don't want to do that. But yet, part of me goes, but why do I have to? And the answer is because I'm the one that's mature in the situation.
Right, because you married him.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
I mean,
And it's
fine
not
line.
that big of a deal, you know. And maybe as time goes on, it will become easier. Now I know it's too new and too soon.
Right.
So I'm not going to aggravate the situation like that. I'll be the mature person in this, and it's fine. You know.
Yeah.
So it'll be.
Well, you're feisty, you know. You
Yeah.
have a little feisty
Yeah.
spirit there.
Yeah, I am. I am. And that feels really good. It does. But it's going to present problems with the guys I go out with because I refuse to let go.
Do you tell them?
Yeah.
What's the reaction?
Don't worry, it'll be okay. I understand. Because the first thing I say, look, I'm divorced. I'm raising 2 kids. I am not going to get serious. I am into myself, and I'm going to be that way. I'm going to be very selfish right now, but it doesn't mean that we can't spend time together, that we won't have fun. But if you want a lot from me now, you're not going to be able to get it. And if you need that now, then this is not going to work. And they appreciate the honesty. They do.
Do they believe you?
Yeah. Yeah, they do. Yeah.
How do you know who to select? You know, I mean.
Oh.
What clues do you use?
It's, well, one person that I'm seeing, I've known since first grade. So we've been friends for years. So that was just, you know.
That's comfortable.
Yeah, very, very, very comfortable, yes. I don't know. If they seem nice. Okay, there's one particular guy gave me my personal space when we met in this, it was a dance, actually a party. And he gave me enough space. He didn't crowd me right away. He kept distance between us, and we had conversations at a certain distance. That made an impression with me because he allowed me my space. He didn't just start coming into my personal space, which I've learned through the counseling that I'm entitled to have and should have.
Good for you.
And just talked about the same kinds of things, similar interests, seemed to treat me with respect, wasn't pushy, and seemed like would be an interesting person to meet. I'm trying not to be too picky because everyone has their own way of doing things. So it's kind of their appearance, how they handle themselves. They don't have to be knocked down gorgeous for me, but if they carry themselves well, can hold a conversation, give me my props, as they say, as a woman, recognizes the things in me and praises me and can appreciate me, that, yeah, my interest. And then we'll see, you know, where we go from there.
When you meet somebody, do you get a sense if some guy is really going to be a problem? Is there a place in your body that you feel it? How do you know that this guy is...
If they invade my personal space immediately, that sets me off. Like, you don't have the right. I haven't given you permission yet. Just hold up a minute here, okay? We may do this and may not. If they're rude to other people, if they have not complimented me right away, or not right away, but at least in our conversation they haven't picked out something that they like about me. That didn't happen with my husband. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to compliment me, but I know I like that, and I'm worthy of that.
Right.
And that should come out. Because that means you're seeing me for me.
Is there any place physiologically when you start to get scared that you feel it?
When they get too possessive.
But how does your body tell you that? I mean, like, my space gets closer. Okay.
Don't come in contact with me.
So you start to get stiffer? Do you feel it in your stomach, your head, or you just feel yourself pulling back and withdrawing?
Yeah, I feel that I need to remove myself from this. My stomach doesn't hurt, my head doesn't hurt.
But you listen to that?
I close up, conversation stops. I start thinking and figuring things out. And this happened with this one particular guy because he was going fast and I wasn't comfortable for him coming into my space. And it was funny because he he spent the night, and well, my kids, where were my kids? Probably awake with their dad or whatever. And it was very uncomfortable for me. It was too soon. And I really liked the way he handled it. He didn't take it offensively. He says, well, do you want me to go? And I went, go? Where are you going to go? You didn't drive. I drove. He says, well, I've got a friend nearby, and I could easily go spend, the day with him. And I'm like, how you going to get there? He says, I'll walk. I'm like, you're going to just walk? And that said a lot to me. He recognized that I needed personal space, that I felt uncomfortable, and that there was no problem with him, leaving. And I went, no, you don't have to leave, but I'm just telling you right now, I feel very uncomfortable, and I hopefully will get through this, And he gave me my space. He did. And that was kind of nice.
Good. Do you ever get fearful? Do you ever have any fears that, or get very anxious about things where you can't figure out where it's coming from?
With my son, being an adolescent, yeah. With men,
Or
right
even
now,
just in general? And do you ever have to, like, sit and think about what's happening, or just sitting down and then things popping in your head that you...
I've been doing that lately. I've been so busy sometimes just doing things, and I would keep busy to escape from the situation. I'm starting to do that now. So I stop, okay, what am I going to do with this situation? It could be what I'm going to do with the kids at work. What am I going to do with my child who just seems to be blowing off at the top and doesn't even know why? What do I do about their dad who said he was going to pick them up and all of a sudden he can't pick them up? So I tend to get quiet. My children say, are you mad about something? And I say, why do you say that? Well, your face. So I know I'm doing that now. And I said, no, I'm not mad. I just need to think about something. So that, yes, I'm doing that. I tended to react in the past.
Like what? Like more jumpy? Or?
Well, yeah, the physical contact. I didn't take time out to stop, think, get myself together, reevaluate the issues, put things in perspective, and approach it in a calm, intelligent way. Sometimes I just jump right in it, and I'm now trying not to react. Sometimes I do react, and I'm aware of it, and I'm like, wait, that's a reaction, I know. Let me answer that in another, in a few more minutes, or let me tell you we'll talk about that tomorrow. And I do take time
Do you get
to think
depressed
about
at all?
Oh, I would have said over a year ago, 2 years ago, no way. But then I realized, yes, I do. But not often. I don't like depression. I like...
That's why you have all this activity.
Yeah.
It keeps it away.
Yeah, I don't like depression. But yet, I've learned that it's good. And I do go through those days where I'm depressed. It's not just because of my period. It's just days where, I'm depressed. And I go through it. I don't try to fix it. I just go through the end of the day. And then the next day, it's okay. It's actually something that I'm supposed to go through. You can't be bubbly and happy all the time. Life isn't a bowl of cherries all the time. And I thought it was. And I've realized through the counseling that it's not. But it's okay if things aren't going okay. Right now, I'm at a very good point in my life.
Well, you sound great.
I'm so happy. Just it's great.
We're going to have to summarize up a little bit.
All right.
So,
but tying in that with the depression, I'm very, very happy and pleased with the way my life is going now. But yet I know there is that other side. I've been on that other side at certain points. But I know I can get through that. And you can be happy again, and then you'll go through that again. And you go through, it's a...
So you're less frightened of
Yes, I'm less frightened. Yes.
It's interesting because you have qualities that are really helping you get through it. One of which you label as stubbornness, but it's also stick-to-itiveness. So there's two sides of
my mom calls that you're a survivor.
Yeah, and you are surviving.
I'm beginning to see that. Yeah, I didn't take credit for that early on, but.
Yeah, and I think you're getting to know yourself and accept yourself.
Yeah, my good points and my bad points. I do have some bad points, yes.
Oh, well, I haven't seen any.
I'm beginning
well, I think maybe a little impulsivity sometimes.
Yes.
And being busy really does, it does two things. One is it keeps you occupied and doing some very purposeful, meaningful things. But, when you have two teenage, or one teenage and one going to get there very soon,
real soon.
Teenage boy, you're going to have plenty to do.
Yeah.
But it also gives you if you don't stop and look at things, you won't be able to process them and deal with them. But it sounds like you're really dealing with that.
Well, the counseling has definitely helped. It has. It's made me realize that's what I'm doing. Sometimes I just go, I'm too busy. Okay, we're not going to do anything. And just sort of slow down. I still have to do it more than I do. I don't do it a lot. One of my friends said, what are you doing during your quiet time? I went, quiet time? What's quiet time? I don't know what quiet time is. Now I do know what quiet time is. But I didn't have it earlier on. Now I need to find some more sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you're getting back with friends. You're back in with your family. The boys have all kinds of activities that are theirs that you participate in. You've got all kinds of activities that are yours, or the ones that you participate with them. So you really are setting up, a new life for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's exciting.
Yeah.
It's got to be exciting.
It is exciting. It is.
And a job that you like as well.
Oh, man, yeah. That helped me get through a lot.
But there'll be bad. You're right. There will be bad moments.
Yeah. Actually, it sounds kind of weird, but I kind of look forward to them so I can deal with them.
Well.
I don't want them to happen, but I'm not as scared. I know that there's another side to it. It's not the end of the world, that you can continue and learn from it.
And the fact that you are allowing yourself to date and have some new friends, but at the same time, really keeping your own personal boundaries and your personal space.
Yes.
You know, I want to just support you in that too, because that's real important.
Yeah, it is. It's like, hey, why didn't I do this before? Because it's a good feeling. And actually, it's good for everybody, I think.
Probably,
you know?
and it's probably very good for you boys to see that, because you know they're at high risk to use abuse in their own relationships, and so they need a lot of encouragement to resolve conflicts in other ways.
Yeah, definitely. So.
Do you have any questions to ask me?
Okay, teacher mode. Let me think. I'm trying to think in general. No, I do appreciate you reminding me to be safe.
Yeah.
You know, with him.
Always.
Because I do tend to put the cloud over things and not see it, and I do appreciate that. Because that's dealing with reality, and sometimes I like to get away from it and have
He's
to.
He's not going to change.
I know.
At least if he does, it'll be over time. It won't be. It won't be 1, 2, 3, boom.
Right?
No.
No. But I do appreciate that a lot. I do. Thank you for that, because it does. I do need to be reminded of that. I do. Were you yourself abused?
No.
Okay.
I was not, but I've worked with abused women for the past 25 years.
Does it seem to be the same pattern all the time? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some different variations, but it is. In fact, I wrote a book that many women read called The Battered Woman.
Okay.
So if you're ever in the mood to read about it, you know, it's still, it was published by Harper and Row in 1979, but people are still reading it.
Because it's still so prevalent.
Yeah, I'm sure they even have it at the shelter.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah.
You know, you might want to pick it up and see where you fit in with some of the others.
Is the reason why we allow that to happen based on the fact of how we see ourselves in society?
Well, I think so.
How women are placed in society.
Of course, that's an important reason. And it's also important that, you know, you have been able to tie it to things that you did that you don't think was positive behavior. So you took responsibility. He gave it to you, but you accepted it. You know, and because you were very strong. You know, I think if it would have been more frequent, you would have been out sooner.
Yes.
You know, that you took the verbal abuse because that was simply, you know, there. But the physical abuse, if it was more frequent, you would have been out sooner.
Yeah. I do believe that.
You know, and I think you protected yourself, and that's why it wasn't as serious or as often. It could have been worse.
Yeah. I think about that every now and then, not too often, because I'm not very proud of that, but I'm a lot better with it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's very easy talking to you, and again, thank you for that. I do.
Well, good. Well, I hope you stay safe and continue on to make a great new life for yourself.
Thank you.
I think you're doing just great.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, Lenore, you really engaged her in this counseling session. You asked her a lot of direct questions, and it seemed to me as though she had never talked about any of this information before. I found that very surprising. That this was...
Well, I gave her permission to talk about things. She's a talker, and so I think she has probably talked about a lot of it before, but only when she had that permission. So there may well have been other therapists with whom she didn't think they'd be interested or that they didn't want to hear. And if you noticed, in this particular case, Gina felt that somehow it took away from the image of being a strong woman to admit that she had been abused. And so it was not something she was going to talk about if she would have felt invalidated.
Well, one of the things I noticed is you started in a very different way than I've often ever seen anybody begin a session, and that was that you really gave her a chance to talk about her kids and a number of pleasant things, just as if two friends were sort of sitting over coffee. And
well, that's part of modeling that egalitarian relationship. And you know, you can talk about it in theoretical terms, but the real important thing is to model that we're just people. And that I respect your knowledge, and your knowledge is to tell me about yourself. And that is important information to let her talk. I also set that up by giving her permission to ask me about who I was. Very few therapists think that that's okay, but the feminist approach says you must put your values on the table, and you must always give the client the opportunity to ask you questions, but reserve the right to say, that's really personal and I don't want to talk about it. At the end, she asked me if I was abused. And I answered the question directly because with abuse victims, that's important for them to know that it does, whether you're abused or you're not abused, it's not shameful. And so otherwise I might not have answered it with another client. But with this client, I thought that was real important for her to hear.
In your summary session, I was, liked the way you were able to zero in really on who she was and just what you accomplished in this meeting. I mean, you worked with her and helped her to identify that she was a survivor, that she was successful, that she was stubborn, and that this could be used to help her follow through on things. Talked about her self-knowledge and her awareness of who she was. Identified how involved she was and that she was really busy in her life, that she was connected with others, and this was a kind of a way to begin her new life. You gave her permission to continue to grow. You highlighted the importance of being safe. And the part that I liked at the end is you finished up with, you're not alone. Other people have been here and have survived and moved on and had full lives.
Well, thank you. That was what I was trying to do. And that's a really nice summary of it. Even in one session, you can give that client that positive hope for growth, and especially for women who are always being told what we don't do well. And for Gina, she took a lot of the blame for the abuse on herself. And I wouldn't do it in the first session other than say to her, it's not your fault. He didn't have to react that way. But as therapy would progress with a client like this, I would really help her understand that the emotional piece, that this isn't your fault. She understands it intellectually. But inside of her, there's something that she's still not comfortable with. And that, I think, giving her the strengths and not picking on her weaknesses initially was the most important thing for her.
Would you have later on, and would you have kind of worked with this thing, because she said, I always touched him first.
Yes.
I thought that was intriguing. That is she building a rule for herself that says you don't touch other people? Or?
Well, that's her experience, and of course it is reinforced by her work as a teacher. We have entered into a period as therapists, as teachers, as service professionals that we're not supposed to touch anybody. And many of us are touchers. And in my own practice, I always ask permission to touch. And what was off camera was that we went to shake hands and it wasn't right. We both looked at each other and I said to her, I'd like to give you a hug. And she said, oh, I'd like that. And we did. It happened to be off camera. I'm sorry, because I think that the permission asking is the critical factor, not the assumption that that's okay. And it is okay to touch someone. It is okay to go to your spouse or your partner and say, I want to talk to you about this. And Gina tends to be an avoider anyhow. So by the time she gets to saying, I want to talk about this, she gets hurt for that. And that's a kind of understanding that eventually she'll come to.
Can we go back to this blame? I was impressed with how easily Gina accepted blame.
That's so typical for battered women.
And she accepted her role,
Yes.
and she didn't even talk to her family for a whole year.
Yeah, that was interesting.
So what kind of message does that send to her husband? If we look at circular communication, I mean, it almost sends a message to him that this is okay with her, that there's a collusion that goes on between the two of them.
I would never use the word collusion because that assumes they have equal power in the relationship. And if one person's willing to use abuse and degradation, whether it's verbal or physical, that already gives them more power. And we're in a society where men start off with more power, even though men don't like that assumption. It is the assumption. They have more social power. So when you start in that way, you're making the assumption that the relationship is based on the equality. This woman was, in my opinion, trying to satisfy what the husband's requirements were, because she had learned that's what a good wife does. And so the message she was giving him was, I love you, and I'm going to give you what you want, even though I'm uncomfortable with it, to prove to you. That's the word she used. I'm going to prove my love to you by doing that. And that's the way she perceived it. And the message that he got, we could only know by asking him. My guess is that it didn't give him permission to batter her, but it did give him permission to be the person who called the tune.
It's important to my partner that I be strong, that I act in ways that show I'm going to be the dominant one in this relationship?
Well, I don't know how much it's important to my partner, but it's important to my self-esteem. Now, we didn't get too much information about him, and that's the difference between doing an individual session and a couples or a family session. Were I doing this as a family session, I would have spent another hour with her, finding out her perceptions of him, and then I would have interviewed him and found out his perceptions of her and my perceptions of him. So I would do both of that. My guess, from what I know about batterers, and particularly about some of the clues she gave me, is that this is a man who's not as comfortable in his job or career as she is, who does not, whether he, she was the one who put the house in her name, put the was responsible financially for everything, which suggests to me that either if economically he was not either bringing in the money or wasn't sharing the money in the household. She was doing a lot of that. And so for many men who have been socialized in that way, they need to find other ways of being the person in power. And that may be one way, is ruling my wife.
In some ways it sounded like he was even surprised that she was that unhappy. And he still wanted to continue the relationship much more than she did. And almost didn't have a clue about this.
Well, she says he didn't have a clue. She says he was not willing to accept responsibility, and that he still denies that he ever battered her.
Sure.
That it was her fault. So therefore, it means he didn't do it.
Yeah.
And so those are some cognitive meanings that he's got, and that she has accepted. And so that would be another place to go with her therapeutically.
So maybe in future sessions, these are issues that you might look into.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You did some things in the therapy session that some people might question. You seem to be leading her on when you identified feelings for her, almost, and asked her, is this how you feel? Is this how you feel? I mean, I was trained that was a no-no to do something like that.
Now, that's why therapy, in the way I was trained, and probably the way you were trained, isn't so successful for working with women. And that's a major difference in not just feminist therapy, but in good therapy techniques today.
What were you doing there?
I was helping her label her emotions that she was expressing in awkward or in not even verbalizing. And for Gina particularly, expressing emotions is much more difficult. She's a very bright woman, she's very intellectualized, and I was helping her name some feelings. I was also giving her information that the psychological abuse was just as important as the physical abuse. And she couldn't describe that. In fact, she said at one point, being spit in the face, she wasn't even sure that was really abuse, even though she did call the police with it. And it's interesting because we've trained police now in domestic violence training to make an arrest. She shouldn't have had to be the one to press charges. Shouldn't be the battered woman's responsibility. And I tried to ask her some questions about it, and obviously in her community at the time that this happened, she still would have been the one who had to make the arrest, not the police officer.
one of the things you talked about, this difficulty with her and the feelings stuff, I noticed that you would kind of move in and then she would start putting up a shield, and so you would move back, and you kind of went back to the talking about her kids and so on, and it was an interesting, really interesting to watch that sort of. You'd take her this point, and then you'd sort of back off a little bit and give her some space.
Yes, and I was trying to mirror her, I mean, which is a technique that we often use, but I was mirroring her emotional style of reporting. When you don't do that with women who have a lot of intensity about what they have to say, or sometimes feelings come up in trauma victims that are provoked by what you're talking about, and a way of distancing would then be to go off on a tangent, and we've all had clients who go off on tangents, and and you're listening for 15 minutes to a story that you can't figure out what that had relationship to, and it probably was just a way of giving them some distance from their emotions. So I was just mirroring her style of doing it, and it's a way both for me as a therapist to check and to give her some validation for her own style of how she handles tough stuff.
And then on another extreme, what I saw you do is to ask a real awkward question. The question, it seemed to produce a gold mine, when you asked it, and you asked it, it said, do you think he will handle adolescence well? And you kind of snickered, from my point of view, when you said that. And then she began just to open up and talk about her own immaturity and her husband. What were you thinking when you asked that question?
Well, I knew from her style, I had learned that talking about her children was very safe, but talking about them in a positive way, and that she felt very comfortable about handling her children's adolescence or impending adolescence. But she had been talking about how she was concerned about the children being uncomfortable with him at times. Now, I was really looking for the possibility of some abusive behavior, whether it was psychological or physical with the children, but I didn't want to ask it directly, because then I could be accused of putting a suggestion in her head. And so we're so careful these days about how we ask the questions. I try to do it in as indirect way as possible. So the question really had a number of issues that I wanted to raise. I didn't know we'd get what we got from it, and I went with what she said. And I also know that for men who batter, one of the biggest issues for them is power and control. And this, from her perspective, that's what she was talking about with her husband. And we know about the power struggles that come up normally in adolescence. And here we have 2 children, but one in particular who is moving very closely, quickly into adolescence, that will be an area of concern. And it's one, Gina does not look at things until they're in her face. She really is a denier, she minimizes. And so I wanted also to call attention to her that adolescence is going to be a problem for this man. Or maybe it will be, and pay attention.
His and his children's, both.
Both.
Well, both. I think you and I could probably talk to Lenore till the cows come home, but let's get some of the audience involved with their questions, specifically about the interview and then generally about the theory.
I recognize that this is a first session, and you did touch on her physical touching and in terms of their interaction and about what she wanted from men. But I wonder at what point you deal with her contribution to the relationship, such as her statement about her wanting to save him, she married him to save him.
Well, I think that's an excellent question, and it certainly, had there not been so many other rich things happening, and had she gone back to that, I would have considered dealing with it in the first session as well. I think that is something that needs to be dealt with, and I tried to deal with some of what I thought was underlying that, and that is her acceptance that he's going to magically change. Without any kinds of intervention, and that all of a sudden he's going to be mature to handle her having a boyfriend at the basketball game, when in fact there's nothing that we know from what she has told us that would support that kind of magical thinking, if you will.
But what about her disappointment in her inability to attain that objective?
Well, I think it is what's underlying that as the same dynamic, which is the if I don't do everything perfectly, I'm not good enough. And I would deal with that in a variety of ways. If I were dealing with her in other therapy sessions, at some point I would, for example, go back to what she said about her mom and how her mom was, she describes her almost as perfect in an idealized way. And she's not as idealized as her mom. But that's about the, if I conceptualize the kind of treatment, particularly with somebody who we're working with who has been abused, that's already the 4th stage out of 5 stages of therapy. The first things I want to deal with is validating her. I want to empower her. I want to make sure that she's somewhat safe. I want to help her begin to reestablish her lifestyle. Then I'll go back and deal with old issues, and that's kind of an older issue. It's at a deeper level.
Do you deal with that issue with her mother? Because she seems to compare herself with her mother in a disempowered way. She said Mom would never allow Dad to,
Yes.
abuse her, and yet
Yes, I could have dealt with that even right there. I could have started to deal with it, but she went off on something else, and I was, and I think some of that was cultural. I was paying more attention to the cultural issue.
Okay.
It's so common when you're working with an African American client to make the assumption that that client it comes from an impoverished background. And I wanted to really check out my suspicions from what she had said was that this woman was raised in an educated home, in a more professional home. But I wanted to check that out before I put some of my own cultural stereotypes on what her background was. And so I chose to go off on that direction instead of going off. But indeed, in doing psychotherapy with Gina, that's one of the issues I'd come back to. Now, whether I would use her mother or whether I would use something else she brought up, or whether I'd use all of it as the dynamic, it's the dynamic underneath, which is if I don't do it all right, I can't possibly be strong, I can't possibly be perfect, I can't possibly be the image of who I want to be, who I should be. And she's so comfortable with her parenting that that's a good place to work. That's in feminist therapy. You work from the strengths rather from the weaknesses. And so that's the point that I would start with.
it almost sounds like you don't want to touch that mother-daughter relationship.
Well,
I mean, there's something about feminist theory that tries to not blame mothers and not look at any kinds of negative implications for that relationship.
well, we certainly, as feminist theory, don't want to blame mothers because mothers get blamed for everything.
Well,
and
guess
it's so
that's what I was-
easy to do that. And so you're absolutely right. But we certainly look at mother-daughter relationships and father-daughter relationships, both of which would be important. But we don't do it until later. That's
so the
not
timing
the.
is important.
That's right. It's timing. It's timing.
Yeah, you made at the end of the session, you made a rather powerful reminder to the client by saying he's not going to change. And then I think you kind of softened that a little bit. But it seems to be somewhat of a shared pessimism amongst domestic violence workers that the outcomes amongst batterers, even when they're in treatment, is not very good. Could you comment on that and whether that's something you believe in also? And what is needed to facilitate change amongst the batterers that would be more effective?
It's a great question. I do not believe that batterers can't change. But I think it's hard, very hard work. And I think not every batterer is the same. You know, we all know that battered women come from a totally heterogeneous group. And that means batterers come from a totally heterogeneous group. But somehow we've gotten stuck on developing just one approach to intervention that is the official approach. So much so that some states, such as the state of Florida, mandate you can only use what's called the Duluth model of intervention. Well, that's not going to work. Just logically, we know that's not going to work with 100% of batterers. And in my experience, I think about 20% of all batterers, or thereabout, from the research and the literature, we don't have interventions that can be helpful to them. And they're violent criminals, and the only thing we can do with them is to really incarcerate them and experiment with different kinds of interventions while everybody else is safe from their violent behavior, because we just don't have the tools to do it. But about 80% probably can be helped in some way. Now, we may not save the relationship, but that's really not the important factor. When you're working in this therapy and in this theory, we're talking about saving the individual and not the relationship. And if your goal is to save the relationship, then you won't have the same way of looking at what is a successful outcome. And so a lot of the pessimism is that the relationship itself can't be saved. And that's probably true in a lot of the cases, although we're doing better with it. And where I think we have slipped up, we're dealing well with the major batterer, who is a power and control problem. And the models that are in the criminal justice field, because that's how we're getting them into treatment, are very successful for that particular kind of abuser. But many batterers also have psychological disorders. And those people who are pessimistic may well not be trained in the breadth of pathological disorders that are on top of the power and control issues. Mm-hmm. And so if we can get those batterers into appropriate treatment, I think we have a very good chance of changing a lot of their behavior. So I'm much more optimistic about that, but it's really being able to put the right fit of treatment to the individual.
Kind of tailoring of the two.
Absolutely,
Uh-huh.
absolutely.
Okay.
Missy?
With regard to the earlier comment, the observation that there was somewhat a bit of labeling of emotions going on during the session, your response sort of flowed along in the same genre, and it was something towards I was helping her label. And throughout the session I noticed comments on your part that seemed to allow her to do a certain behavior or giving her permission to. And so I'm wondering if you could share your perspective on how this particular perspective seems to reflect a sense of empowerment that could come from self-discovery.
Well, I think labeling helps. You know, when many of us were trained where you weren't supposed to say, you notice I make a lot of comments about saying good, or that's fine, or really showing her that I approve of certain kinds of things that she does. Well, many therapies say you're not supposed to do that. And I've even heard it called cheerleading at some points. Well, how can you empower someone if you don't help them know what's right and what's not right? And if you live in a culture where you accept that women are often told, like in the Braverman study, which hasn't changed so much. I mean, there's been a replication of it done just a few years ago, and there aren't that many differences, despite 2 decades of the so-called women's revolution, you know, that we're still getting the messages that being very verbal, being very emotional, wanting emotional connection, not liking hierarchical or patriarchal structures, wanting to express our anger when we feel angry, are all bad and not womanly, then where does a woman get the information that this is okay? That what you're doing is fine, that this is good? And I mean, we know enough in our learning theory as psychologists that people repeat behavior that they're rewarded for. So why are we not doing that as therapists? Why do we only pick on all the symptomatology and stick with the pathology rather than look for some of the reciprocals of behavior that suggest that you don't have to say you're doing this wrong if you're saying you're doing this right, and by doing this right, you're not going to do the wrong thing. And that's really a behavioral technique, and it's superimposed onto the feminist theory.
Could I just follow that up
Sure.
with I'm wondering if this somehow does not reinforce a situation that the battered woman has just freed herself from, that of seeking the approval or going to someone in a supposed position of authority for affirmation.
Well, that's a great question, and it certainly is something that you must be very careful about. because it's very easy for therapists to sort of slide right in and do just exactly that. Where as therapists, we want to be healers, and we do have the power of the authoritarian role. And that's why I think it's so critical, and it's been so successful for abused women to get on with their lives by working with someone who really pays attention to those power kinds of issues. That's part of the egalitarian modeling that I do at the same time. It's part of the mirroring where I sort of follow her kind of rhythm of how she deals with things. So I am giving her the information that, yes, it's appropriate, but at the same time, I'm also trying to help her cognitively clarify what's happening for her. Many women don't trust their cognitive impressions. This is a woman who deals very well intellectually, doesn't deal very well emotionally. She really is closed off for her emotions, and part of what she does is that she retreats from anything that's uncomfortable. If you noticed, I kind of pushed her about anxiety. Where do you feel it? Where do you feel your stress? How do you feel your stress? Well, basically, she says, I don't feel it.
But she's got
Yes, but her hands. That's right, when her hands got so clenched physically, you know. But she could not label that. Well, that's important information. It's important information for the therapist if you're going to go on with her, but it's also important information for you to be able to give her permission that it's okay to label it. You know, it's okay to feel it. It's okay to talk about it.
Given the fact that she seems to be denying and minimizing, did you see any indication that perhaps she might even be repeating the same behavior with her current boyfriend? I noticed that he had commented to her that she was very vocal and vivacious in the public, but in private, that you know he wasn't getting enough attention. So it seemed as though he was being very critical, and I was wondering if you felt that she would be picking up on those, what I call kind of red flags.
That's really an important point. I tried to explore some of that with her, and here's a perfect example of using the reciprocal. If she really can keep her boundaries and she can say no commitment, then she can play out that relationship given her own timing. And I added a little extra, which she was very supportive of, which was saying, you better stay safe. Yes, it's okay normally for you to think that you could be able to bring him to a basketball game, but this is a boundary. You know, you've got to keep this as a boundary because you're not quite out of the last one yet. And of course, she's jumping into dating a whole lot sooner than many of us would think would be good for her if she's really trying to explore herself. But I think this is a woman who has learned to explore herself through other people. And so she's probably going to do this for a while. And the important thing is to really be able to keep her focused on finding herself in the relationship. So if it is a bad relationship or one that has the potential to get controlling or powerful or take away some of who she's feeling, that intensity of strength, which I was supporting, is going to be the reciprocal to prevent that. And if I were working with her in therapy, I'd give her the courage to be able to say, yes, I'll stay in, or no, I won't. And she's obviously still looking because she was, kind of in an interchange with this man in the restaurant that she talked about. Very recently. I don't remember whether it was the night before or so. And that was okay. She was able to know the difference between with her husband that wasn't okay and now it was.
I'd like to ask about safety and boundary issues within the session itself, and particularly if we're a male therapist, which of course changes the power dynamics.
Yes.
And given that she is so intellectualized, how do you help her not get into issues at a content level that will later make her feel too exposed or too vulnerable?
Well, I think it has to do with the questions that you ask and the ability to allow her to distance herself. That's her best defense, at least the best defense we saw. In this particular session, is that she does have the ability to pull back. And I think that if you were getting too close, she would give you the clues that you'd have to be very careful about recognizing. One would be to shut down and get quiet. Another one would be to do a lot of chatter kind of patter, and go off in places that really were safe for her. She is a strong woman, and we also know that she impulsively fights back when she feels trapped. And so if you recognize these kinds of things and let it happen, then you're giving her permission, and you can monitor where you go. And then I wouldn't follow up on those questions right away. I'd wait a while.
I'm sorry. Would you eventually, maybe not in the first session, start pointing out that this is how she protects herself and in a sense validate that?
Well, I did. At the end, I tried to give her that validation by saying she's very stubborn, that sometimes she's impulsive, and that she's feisty. You know, and I didn't say it as negative, because they're not negative qualities, but they can be if they're used inappropriately. And so, I mean, that's the kind of helping her understand that I'm not being judgmental about who she is, and helping her kind of accept herself a little bit more. Again, it's the subtlety of labeling, of naming it, and just kind of leaving it there. But yes, later on I might, as the relationship develops. But it would take longer. One of the major differences for a man and for a woman in doing this kind of gender sensitivity is to be gender sensitive, and to accept the fact that there is, especially for a woman like this who has been into her woman power, as she puts it, that you are the other. And let her know, just like I attempted to let her know, is that I'm not African American, that I have some friends, I know a little bit, but you got to teach me about this, because I don't really know. And I gave her that permission. Well, you got to do that as a man, to say, I am not a woman. Being abused, if you have been abused and you want to self-disclose, you can say, well, you know, men can be abused. But the minute you say that to a battered woman, you better not. You better have something to back it up, because there's so few men who are abused in adult relationships that women take that as a kind of devaluing who they are and what their story is, and they close down.
Minimizing.
Yes. And again, as a man, you have to be willing to listen. Too many good, kind men have a hard time listening to what other men have done to women, and so they give either subtle or sometimes not so subtle messages that say, well, let's not talk about this. I got it. I know you've been abused. Now let's not focus on this. Let's not. This is just, you know, not important to listen. And it is in trauma theory, we know it's the repetition of the trauma, sometimes again and again and again, that moves it and processes it in a safe way. And so that's hard for male therapists to do without really having some experience, and especially if she starts dealing with anger and anger at men. The biggest mistake I see some young men doing, being inexperienced, is that they start to turn off the anger too quickly. It is a stage of therapy, is to be angry at men, and most women get through it, and they get through it at their own time. You know, and that's part of the safety plan, is that if you help design some safety. Look how clever. She had a safety plan worked out with her family that was a good one for them, and she never had to use it, but that was real important to her. That gave her that strength to be able to, at her own time, leave. It took her a while to leave.
We can also move down to more general questions I think we have about the theory. So.
There was one particular moment when perhaps I could say a light went on in Gina's mind. She made the third attempt to get her husband's attention, and to quote her, "This is not going to get any better." And from that point on, she went a different direction.
Yes.
Obviously, violence among human beings is quite barbaric, you know, and the goal is to reduce that through whatever methodology. My question is, in your years of research and experience in this area, and you know, working directly with people, what could be done to accelerate the process whereby a person gets to that place where they say, "This is not going to get any better"? That was a moment of self-realization for her, and she chose a different kind of life. She didn't want the negative tension anymore.
Well, I think it was also fear. I think what happened to her, she got afraid in that last incident. And the fear that she had, she talked about, was she looked at him and he looked different. He had never looked like that before. And I think what happened was the connection between them was broken. And she knew that she had no more influence over him at that very moment. And that's what the key to what most battered women talk about, is that they know at that moment there's nothing they can do. He will do it all. And that's what I think was the light bulb that went off for her. And from that point on, she said, I was out of that relationship. It took me a long time to physically get out, but emotionally, I was out of it. Now, the best thing, of course, is prevention, and we've got to get in there and do a lot of work with males and females, girls and boys, and men and women, so that they really don't believe that they are the ones who can make this person change. I think that's the work that I've really been concentrating on a lot of on the Domestic Violence Institute that I work with. We're doing tapes, we're doing 900 number calls that people can call in, and publications and things like that, because we really want people to have the support that says it's never too early to get the message across that power and control and using violence to get and maintain power and control is simply not going to get you what you want in the long run.
Yeah, it sounds like that's an important point of this gender-sensitive or feminist approach, is education.
Yes.
And we kind of have talked around that, but I'm really glad that you were able to highlight that.
Yes, and I told her a book to read, which is educational.
The bibliotherapy.
That's
sure.
right. If she wouldn't have been out, I might have recommended Ginny Nacardi's book on Getting Free, which I think is one of the better books in helping a woman figure out how to get out of a relationship in a safe way. Okay. But I want to just say one other point, and that is, it is not feminist to base your treatment approach on getting out of a relationship. The goal must always be to be safe and to be violence-free. It doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter to the therapist whether you're in or you're out of the relationship. It's taking care of yourself and your children to the best that you can that has to be the focus, and that's something that we often forget. When we think if you get out, that means that the violence is going to stop. And I did have to remind her that just because she's out of the relationship doesn't mean he's going to stop his violence. Many batterers don't.
I'm glad you raised the issue of prevention, because that's really what I wanted to ask you about in a more general way. In your writings, you talk about the difference in ways in which we sociologically raise boys and girls, which creates many of the problems that we're confronted with. What kind of steps can we take to increase that educational process? It's coming very, very slowly, but I think it needs to really be pushed further.
I agree. Social change is slow, of course. Meaningful and lasting social change is slow. But it really means that you can't be a blank screen as a therapist either. You have to be able to say that these are some of your values, that your values are safety, your values are nonviolent conflict resolution, and that no woman or man, for that matter, deserves to be hit, no matter what they do. And that's why that collusion that we talked about earlier is a way that sort of leads you down a different path, if that's the focus that you would have. The focus is not on self-blame. The focus is not on what she did, even though I supported her at the end for knowing and recognizing that the time she was in physical danger was something related to something that she did. But every woman should have the right to be able to go over to their partner, or every man to be able to go over to their partner and say, I want to talk about this now. This is important to me, without fearing that you're going to get hit or hurt from it.
Getting back to gender sensitive and feminist, it seems to me clearly that any therapist, male or female, needs to be gender sensitive in working. But by definition, is a feminist therapist have to be a female?
No, although some people would say yes. Okay. But I would say no. And this has been an argument in the field for quite some time. And most of my colleagues will say that you can be pro-feminist and be a man, but you can't really be feminist. And that's why we've sort of moved to a gender-sensitive approach, which really talks about understanding that men have been socialized into roles that have been incompatible with what women need, as well as women being socialized into roles that are incompatible with meeting their own needs and with men's needs. Certainly, the sex role socialization that occurs with girls taking all the responsibility for emotions and boys taking all the responsibility for the intellectual and financial responsibilities of families are real detrimental to egalitarian relationships. And if you don't have the ability to know yourself, know what roles are comfortable for you, and negotiate.
I think we have time for one more question.
I'm wondering about the routine. How often do you see a client? How long do sessions last? How does this fit in with the HMO 6 sessions,
3 sessions.
3.
Well, I think the kind of treatment that is the best treatment is we're dinosaurs, those of us who believe in treatment that's determined by both the goals that the client and you set together and where you want, how long it takes you to meet them. I resent health management organizations telling me how long I can see someone. And the only way you can step outside of that is by saying to the client, this is like a responsibility that you have for yourself. And you have to be willing to find some financial way that may not be through your health maintenance organization. And I actually personally don't belong to any of them. It's just a luxury and a personal choice that I have because I have a specialization and because I'm well known. But I have a daughter who's a beginning psychologist, and so I know what's happening to beginning psychologists, and they can't stay away as those of us who are older and more established in our practices can. So what I say to them is that we have to look at managed health care in a different way. Psychotherapy isn't only about mental health, bad mental health, it's about good mental health. And it's like an education, it's training your mind and it's giving you a gift of life and of a satisfying life. And we find ways to pay for it, and that's part of what we try to do is to teach our clients those kinds of things. If anybody thinks that you can do a therapy with somebody like Gina, who has lots of issues that still need to be explored in 3 or 6 sessions, we can deal with a couple of symptoms. I can do some things with her, and so my goals would be more limited with her. On what we could do in that amount of time, but it wouldn't be complete. And to work with Gina's husband, if we ever got him in to treatment, most people who work with batterers say that it's anywhere between 2 to 5 years to really help somebody make the changes and maintain the changes.
Well, it seems to me that this managed care philosophy is impacting our interview here too, because I would like to continue this further, and we're not going to be able to. Are there any concluding thoughts or remarks that you might have? Anything that you weren't able to present that you might want to?
Well, I think this is a great discussion because you're raising all of the issues that I think are very important. This is just an initial session. It's I hope an example of how a more positive approach, an approach that really looks for and identifies strengths. Think about how psychologists are trained to write reports. We write all about every single deficit, and we really don't value the strengths. I mean, our clients come to us having lived whatever X number of years they've lived, developing a lot of very positive as well as negative strategies in adaptation. And it's really our responsibility, I think, to look at both sides of it. And for people who have been oppressed, looking at their strengths is the way to start. It doesn't mean you don't get to deficits at times, but you give yourself the time, and that helps provide the respect and the rapport and the modeling of the relationship that then lets you go on to help somebody really become empowered in a world that doesn't always value them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lenore.
So who was doing the drinking?
Well, both my parents drink, and at this point, I don't know, but my dad did most of the drinking while I was growing up.
Was he loud? Angry?
Yeah.
Abusive?
Not physically, no.
But mentally?
Verbally or whatnot, yeah. I'd say.
Hard to please him?
I honestly don't know that answer. I don't think. Hard to please. I don't think so. I don't think he was hard.